All right. Hello, everyone. We are live. Who? Um, so it's very intense news that we are hearing as of today. The United States is bombing Venezuela. The United States has abducted the president of Venezuela and his wife. The abduction was done by the U.S. Special Forces. And I actually forgot to grab the book from downstairs, but I'm reading The Fort Bragg Cartel, this new book by Seth Harp that just came out about drug dealing and other very dark shenanigans in the highest echelons of the military, or maybe not highest, but like most kind of secretive and black ops types parts of the military. So hearing that the abduction was done by the special forces, I'm learning a lot about the special forces in this book, and hearing that the abduction was done by the special forces doesn't surprise me, and just is pretty scary, as this whole thing is in general, as the United States just becomes more and more of a rogue gangster state. So anyway, I'm not really super educated on the subject of Venezuela and of Maduro, but I looked at the astrology for this and it's just a little too wild to not talk about. So pretty much tonight, for the next little while, I'm going to tell you about a bunch of astrology. We're going to look at a bunch of different charts and a bunch of different overlaps. Venezuela's chart, the United States chart, Maduro's chart, Trump's chart. And I'm not necessarily going to have any great interpretations of what these things actually mean, but we can at least look at them and then we can see how things play out. So if you're here in the chat, if you want to say hi, I always appreciate that. And also, please, if you want to be active in the chat, if you want to share your own thoughts on what this astrology means, I really welcome that. We can maybe hive mind, crowdsource some of these interpretations. So let's start, not here actually. Let's start by looking at these three charts together so I can show you just the wildest thing, which you might have already seen about or heard about, because I've seen a couple other astrologers that did post about this. But if you just look right here, we have Venezuela's chart on the inner circle, and actually we have the United States chart in this middle circle. We have the transits in the outer circle, and I set this for the exact time of the full moon, which was about 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Eastern time this morning. So Venezuela's natal sun is 12 degrees of Cancer. The United States natal sun is 13 degrees of Cancer. And look at where the full moon was last night. Directly aligned with both of those suns. So that is just kind of wild. First of all, I wanted to start off by pointing that out. We'll get back to what that maybe says about this particular situation in a minute. But yeah, that's just really wild timing. This is Venezuela's chart. I do not know the history of Venezuela, but I just thought I would point out a couple interesting things about this chart. So you might notice Chiron at 25 Aquarius on the IC, and some of y'all might be making the connection that that is the degree of the United States moon, and also very close to Donald Trump's ascendant. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I just also thought it was interesting, and this is without me. I just don't know anything about the actual history here. I know some things about the general history of when national borders were formed in Central and South America, but I don't know anything about Venezuela specifically. But it is interesting that Venezuela also has, as the United States does, a Gemini 7th house, and then the Cancer sun in the 8th house. So just very broadly speaking, there are some overlaps, and we're going to look at the charts of the United States and Venezuela together, but just interesting to notice off the bat that there is that similarity to the two countries' temperaments. Although a Scorpio rising country is pretty different from a Sagittarius rising country, Venezuela there is also something here with the Gemini in the 7th house. And I can't say that, the United States is a two-faced, kind of deceitful Gemini in the 7th house and, assume that Venezuela as a country has none of that. So there may be some interesting things in the way that Venezuela as a country communicates to its enemies and its allies. I've talked multiple times about how that has showed up through the United States history. These are different planets too, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, not Mars and Uranus, so it's not quite as intense, but that's just interesting. The Cancer sun here in the same place is also interesting. And if we look at just the transits to Venezuela's chart, we see Uranus rising over the descendant now, and that also is just a transit that kind of makes it not surprising if there is some warfare and some upheaval kind of coming in from the outside to this country. Let me check the chat real quick before I go on. You have pigeons in your room, B. Henderson? I think your name is Brian, but I don't know why I'm thinking that. I didn't. So I haven't listened to like Trump's speeches or anything. So sorry that I'm like out of date or out of touch, but like clue me in if I need to know anything. I didn't hear that they originally said they wanted to do this attack a few days ago. Yeah, maybe they, even if it wasn't astrologically based, maybe they waited to get around the corner of that square. Russia, Putin, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, that could be a whole other interesting thing to look at. But getting back to these transits, let's see where we're going to go next. So Venezuela's chart, really the main thing I see happening, other than this Cancer full moon, is Uranus rising over the descendant. But let's jump around a little bit here. There's a lot more interesting things actually happening to Maduro's chart. Again, I don't know who he is really. I don't know the history here. You guys know that I'm a leftist. I know that the American propaganda about Maduro is inaccurate, but I also don't really know the details of who he is. But his chart is pretty interesting. And I have the asteroids pulled up here because there's one in particular that I wanted to show. So these transits are actually kind of wild. He has a Libra moon at the very bottom of the chart. Right now it's getting opposed by Chiron. It's getting squared by Jupiter. So this Chiron-Jupiter square is directly activating Maduro's moon. So this is a very, very private moon and a private person, although he may have a public persona, but he keeps his true feelings probably very much under wraps. And to have this public abduction take place at the time of Chiron at the top of his chart. So this is the very visible part of the chart, and Chiron often manifests as like losing face or making a mistake or putting your foot in your mouth or being embarrassed or screwing up somehow. Now, obviously, he didn't do those things so much, but the event of, being kidnapped from your own country that you're president of, having these pictures come out publicly of you, like, in between the special forces people and the, picture on the plane or whatever, it's very extremely Chiron at the top of the chart. And then Jupiter has been stationing directly on his ascendant as well. So this has related to generally like more attention coming to him as over the past few weeks or months as this escalation has happened. The whole thing about the New Monroe Doctrine, all of that recently has corresponded to Jupiter hanging out on Maduro's ascendant. So there has been this expansion of his general like perception and the amount of people that know about him. The asteroid I thought was really interesting is Pallas here, right on his ascendant. And he was kidnapped with his wife. And the archetype of Pallas in mythology is a goddess who's like a very both intelligent and spiritual goddess of war. And she's known for having a lot of like strategic insight, but she plays a role. Her most famous role, I think, is in the Odyssey. So she plays this role to Odysseus where she is like his kind of spirit guide and like the voice that's in his ear. And she, sometimes has insights that he doesn't have. And she tells him, go this way, don't go this way or whatever. And I forget what it is specifically, but she gives him some good strategy for the like battles that he has to fight. And she's also kind of invisible. So wherever you have Pallas in your chart can be a place that you play a little bit of like a right-hand man kind of role, or like the Wizard of Oz, or the person that's kind of whispering in the leader's ear. And I thought it was interesting anyway that he has this on his ascendant, and he was kidnapped with his wife, and it just makes me like curious about their relationship and how much she plays the role of like spiritual guide and intelligent muse and these kind of themes of Pallas Athena. And then Pluto has been transiting his south node. Pluto will not come back this far in the zodiac, so technically the transit to his south node is over, but this looks pretty ominous as far as like being kidnapped. That may be a karmic dynamic for him. That may be something that he has actually experienced in other lives. But yeah, that's a little heavy. Yeah, and then he's got just some interesting stuff coming up. It's not as relevant, but now that I'm looking at it, like in the next several months, Uranus will oppose his Mercury and his Sun. If the United States doesn't just like extrajudicially murder him, like he might have some interesting things to say during that time. And then Uranus also is going to transit his Nessus, and I don't know what this is about either, but it's just interesting. Nessus relates to like power and power dynamics and abuses of power. And Nessus in Gemini is maybe, a tendency to abuse power or to like engage power dynamics, particularly through like language and speech and storytelling and the mind in general. So he does have a little bit, for a public figure, kind of like Zoran. He's got almost, not as much as Zoran, but he's got all his personal planets here at the bottom of the chart or like below the horizon. So he is less inclined towards like out there public leadership, than some. But he does, this Nessus actually like could be a very interesting placement for a politician who gives speeches to crowds and, uses that kind of Gemini energy in the 11th house a lot. The times that I've seen Maduro speaking, which has just been in like little clips, it's very cute. seems like a cute old man. I don't know. He's not even that old, but he just seems like a cute man. I mean, there's some clip of him like singing some little sweet song to kids or something. I don't know. I feel like his Libra moon is evident in those clips, even though technically, or you would expect this to stay kind of buried and hidden and not be like visible publicly. But anyway, maybe he knows what he's doing more than he appears to with this Nessus placement. And as Uranus comes in to conjunct it and also like plays with his Mercury and his Sun, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Interesting to see what happens to his communication and how it evolves and what he has to say if he is in a situation where he is free enough to speak his mind, like ever again, which like who the fuck knows. Maybe that's all about Maduro for right now. There's still a lot of overlaps to look at. Just checking back to the chat for a second here. Bless your pigeons, B. Henderson. Okay, so what else do we want to look at here? There were a few other interesting overlaps that I thought I would talk about between Venezuela and the US. So we don't need to look at the transits right now. But yeah, so here you can see the Cancer 8th house and Gemini 7th house overlaps. And the suns are almost exactly the same. The birthdays of the country are just one day apart. I don't know why that is. The Mars in the US chart is conjunct the Jupiter and Mercury in the Venezuela chart. And this Mars I have talked about a lot as speaking to the United States' very deceitful, two-faced way of handling its 7th house, handling all its international relationships. And the shadow side of Cancer in the US chart, we have talked about on this channel a lot. But we can see those same themes. I feel like there's kind of a lot in the 8th house, just a lot of layers. If we bring the transits back in, we've got not only the full moon there, but we've got Jupiter that has been there for a while. And here in this situation, we see some, like, I would say shadow Cancer greediness and almost like hoarding of resources. We've talked a lot about the shadow Cancer theme of nativism and the exclusionary potential, right? Of like some people are in, some people are out. So I feel like there's that kind of an energy just active right now as well, even though this particular event is not about defense of its own territory for the United States. They do want to replace Maduro with this woman who was given the Nobel Peace Prize like last month or whatever, who is basically a fascist, who will, I'm sure, activate the shadow tendencies of this Cancer sun for Venezuela as well. And, probably has intentions to also turn the country into a surveillance state and create more of a, crash the economy that has already crashed, create more of a second or third class citizenry than there already is. So I think all of that can be shadow Cancer, among other things. Here you can see the overlap of the US moon with Chiron on the IC for Venezuela. I'm not sure what to make of that, except, as I said, this is also the degree of Donald Trump's ascendant or descendant. And this is also where there is an eclipse in February that a lot of astrologers are talking about, maybe being, Trump's ending or something like that, which is not necessarily my prediction. And then, so I'm sorry that I'm just like throwing out a bunch of things without telling you what I think they mean, because I don't really know what I think they mean, but it just, you can't help noting all these overlaps. The last one here that I wanted to mention is, so Venezuela has these nodes, Pluto conjunct the south node, and then the United States Neptune is conjunct the north node in Venezuela. And Neptune in the Sibley chart, I've only talked about a little. I have not heard like any other astrologers ever address the meaning of this Neptune, even though it's right at the top of the chart. It's really prominent. Neptune does sometimes kind of disappear into the background energetically, but also I don't have a clear interpretation of this Neptune for what it means in the original creation of the United States. But the Neptune return was in 1939, and that was the year that the that physicists discovered, I'm totally blanking on the term, fission, which is the like nuclear reaction or like the chemical reaction or atomic reaction that is used for powering nuclear weapons. And so this, I've also talked about this Neptune as probably relating to the, maybe hidden technological developments related to the UAP phenomenon. In general, I think this Neptune in Virgo does speak to like technology. And so the North Node, the overlap here just makes me think about like the tech companies and surveillance companies and their role in this, attempt at regime change and at taking over. Because obviously we don't have like a lot of details about how this kidnapping was pulled off or, what was going on kind of behind the scenes. But I am sure that a lot of technology was involved, I'm sure that a lot of shady ass like surveillance shit was involved. So I think that this overlap might speak to that element of it. Looking back at the chat from us for a second here. 36 years ago to the day, the U.S. did the same thing to Noriega in Panama. Wow. Exactly to the day, huh? So I hope your name is Brian, because I keep on calling you Brian, but I actually could be wrong about that. But B. Henderson asks, do you think there could be some dealings behind the scenes, and that's why the military response has been so muted from Venezuela? I actually didn't look up the exact time that like the bombing started or the time of the kidnapping. I don't know if we can get an exact time for that. So that chart could have some clues about what was going on behind the scenes. But other than that, I don't have a sense about that yet. Right. Okay. So Michelle is talking about this Mars, Venus, Sun stellium. We should talk a little bit about that too. And the different themes there. So let's look at that real quick. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, I was going to say something about this too. So this stellium is building. These planets like travel together for the next couple of weeks. I was noticing, though, how Venus and Mars are both invisible right now. And in like old mundane astrology, it's not an auspicious time to go to war when Venus and Mars are invisible. Um, when Venus is, from what I have heard, it was considered the most auspicious time to go to war. Towards the end of a Venus retrograde or after a Venus retrograde, that's when Venus is in the morning star, when she's in the morning sky, and she's like, can be kind of a red color. She can appear kind of red during that phase. So from what I have understood, like that's the one of the times anyway that was considered most auspicious. But least auspicious, I think, is when you can't see either of these important planets. And I think like in the case of this action against Venezuela and these three planets gathered together, you do have, it makes sense that like maybe a nation would take an action that it had been planning for a long time at this kind of stellium, obviously, even if they don't know about the astrology, because this is the kind of moment when multiple things come together. So in the case of, Venus and Mars, you could have had the right people, the right timing, the right firepower, like things all kind of came together at this time of the full moon. And that's why they maybe chose to do it at this time, and even, maybe why the energies weren't right a couple days ago. Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars were all out of bounds with the full moon. Interesting. I don't pay much attention to that because it's too much. It changes too often for me to pay attention to. But yeah, that is interesting. So, I mean, in terms of the muted military response, yeah, I'm trying to have just like no expectations and really see what happens around how other countries respond to the United States growing use of illegal force. So, super curious to see how China responds to this. China has been building a lot with Venezuela the past many years. Venezuela is not allowed to trade their oil for dollars, which is the main reason that like the country's economy is doing badly. But China has been buying oil from Venezuela in yuan, and China has built infrastructure there. I don't know if any of that has been destroyed. They just very recently helped to build a really big, I think, like port in Venezuela. So looking at the astrology, you could say that a muted military response might be a smart reaction from people operating under these energies. Again, even if they don't know about the astrology, there might be, some intuition that, oh, we can't really see things clearly right now. I think, there's nobody really leading the way when you have these three planets so close together, and the sun's light kind of overpowers the energies of the other planets, so they can't really individuate. And so it does seem like an energy that would be better suited to waiting and strategizing and taking action at the exact right moment than an energy that would be suited to, reacting in an explosive way immediately. China and Russia have already said that this U.S. action will not go unanswered. I hope that's actually true. Xi and Putin were, I haven't looked at Xi's chart actually. Putin's very interesting. I might pull him up at the end here. They were both born in 53 under a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Dang, thank you, Michelle. I did not know that. Okay. Oh my God, so much to look up, so much to research. Yeah. So I mean, you guys probably feel me, like, haven't been super impressed with China and Russia and their response to the genocide in Gaza or to other crimes committed by the United States. And I feel very unsure, honestly. I used to really think that, like, Putin and Xi saw the United States for how bad it is, how horrific it is, and how untrustworthy it is. But sometimes I think they don't even see how bad it really is, or like how, not that they don't see how bad it has been in the past, but still that she still underestimates how violent they will get in the future. I hope I'm wrong about that underestimation, and I hope, it's like shitty for us here in America, but like, I think if I want to like have a hopeful outlook on like the long-term vision of the world, I have to think of it as like, China's just like the sleeping tiger or whatever, right? Like China's just waiting to rise and biding their time and confident that they can destroy the United States, like kneecap us when the moment is right. Otherwise, it's like, who's going to stop us from just fucking destroying everything? Let's just look here real quick at Donald Trump, because the last thing I wanted to talk about is I did predict something along these lines. I forget if it was in a live stream or maybe it was in the video about Trump's astrology from a medical astrology perspective. But first of all, so the thing that I predicted was that when Uranus was stationing in this final square to Trump's ascendant and his Mars, I predicted that it would be Iran, that they would go back to war with Iran, because during that first war with Iran, it was when Uranus was at 26, 27 Taurus in this square for the first time. So I think, Uranus really activates Trump's already very activated, very restless, very aggressive Leo Mars. It also activates his very prideful, big man, wanting to do big man, big things, 29 Leo ascendant. So, yeah, I did predict back in the fall that there would be a war, like, starting around this time. And I mean, this is the same, Uranus was right here when Trump was elected. Like, it's still just hanging out, doing his thing at the top of his chart. If we want to, real quick, look at Trump and Maduro together. So Maduro has this Leo Mars also. Fascinating to me how many politicians have this Leo Mars. I think you've got Putin, Netanyahu, Bill Clinton, I think. Probably many others have this Leo Mars. Yeah, and then this palace of Maduro's that I said might relate to his wife is conjunct Trump's Venus-Saturn conjunction, where, Jupiter is also activating this, and this relates to Trump's, like, hatred of women. I don't know, not much else here, I guess, to talk about, but I did just want to mention that Uranus square to Trump's Mars, because I think that does relate to what is going on right now. Um, Questions? Things you guys want me to talk about more? Trump trying to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Yes. Right. I like by starting wars and then ending them and then saying that he ended them, like I sadly enough, it's like that could probably be a pretty successful strategy. I think that might be true. Yeah, I mean China kneecapping us sounds extremely devastating. Uh if you want to start to like need that kind of territory with your mind, I really recommend the book American War by Omar El Akkad. Uh, it's a novel that takes place in like the 2070s, and it describes a future where the United States has sunk and China and the Arab world have risen up, and at the end there's something like that. Not to make any spoilers, but if you're interested in just stretching your mind towards those kind of possibilities of another world order that sucks for the US, I definitely recommend that book. Strikes on Nigeria, I didn't even hear about. The new moon in July 2024 was the new moon for today's full moon, right? Like the Cancer new moon. Oh, yeah. It's probably right around that time. I don't think I have anything else that I wanted to say. Like there's like a bunch of other things about the astrology that I didn't even get to. Just for fun, I'm just gonna pull up Putin's chart just for fun, even though he's not super directly involved in this. Always fun to look at Trump and Putin's chart together. Oh no, Putin doesn't have that Leo Mars. Where is his Mars? Oh, it's in Sagittarius. I think Netanyahu definitely has the Leo Mars, though. Somebody said something about Putin that made me want to pull the chart up, but now I already forgot what it was. Oh, the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So Xi, I'm not going to pull up right now because I don't think I have him in my files. It would be too much. But where is it? Saturn Neptune conjunction. Pretty close to conjunct his sun. Interesting. Targeting ISIS in Nigeria. Oh my god. Yeah, historians are saying America is following the typical end of empire moves. I mean, 100%. 100%. I mean, it's the overextension, right? It's the just narcissistic bubble that empires get in where they just cannot imagine an end to the expansion, and especially if it's like America, it's just in our DNA to be an empire and to be colonizers. But yeah, I think both the just going after a bunch of enemies all at once, thinking you can take on all these enemies all at once, and then also the technology piece, as scary as it is, and we should be scared of it because I think they have a shit ton of weapons that they have not even really broken out yet. In the book The Collapse of Civilizations. Let me check. Let me make sure I give it the right name for this. Oh, it's called The Collapse of Complex Society. It's by Robert Tainter, Joseph Tainter. I recommend that book if you want to learn more about collapse. But that book basically comes to the conclusion that complex societies or empires or civilizations collapse based on this concept of diminishing returns on increasing complexity. So as a civilization starts to complexify the way that it operates, it is able to kind of harvest less and less of its own resources. That's an oversimplified way to put it, but basically like that's something that has been tracked and even like scientifically measured. And when you're trying to sustain a very complex society, when you're just trying to sustain an empire, you will feel like you have to turn to more complex systems and solutions to maintain that, but ultimately diminishing returns on increasing complexity means that you'll eventually be using more energy than you are able to get out of that process. And so with our technology, you know, they're able to do a lot of things. Like it's not only like smart bombs and white phosphorus, it's also all this surveillance, all this tracking, the shit they did with the pagers in Lebanon, like. So there's a lot of like near future, really, really dark potentials for the tech, but a little bit longer term, unless they do have some miraculous free energy thing that they're not telling us about, that they might have that, but if they don't, then it's just not going to be that long. It's not going to be more than a few decades, long enough for them to do massive damage, but it's not going to be that long before all of this increasing complexity just like, you know, is the Jenga tower that got too high and too top heavy and all collapses. So this is where we're at. It's pretty bad. It's pretty horrific. I don't know what else to say. It's one thing after another. Maybe it's not quite as horrific as a start to the new year as last year when we had like 2 like kind of mass casualty of, or like the exploding car and shooting on in New Orleans, and then the fires, and I don't know. New torpedo by Russia. Yeah, I heard some stuff about Russia has something that we can't create also. 100 megaton warhead. But also they have some kind of long range missile that we don't have or something. I just heard something about that recently, but I'm definitely not somebody that can speak with intelligence about like different types of weapons. All right, well, glad you guys appreciate me being humble about what I don't know. Definitely don't know a ton about this, but well, interesting to look at the astrology anyway. I will not be live tomorrow night, but I'll try to jump on like this over the next couple weeks. I will not be live the next 2 Sundays, but if there are, you know, world-changing events, I'll try to come on and say what I can about the astrology. Yeah, I guess that's all for now. Oh, the other thing I want to share, just so you have a heads up, is that I'm working on Doomer Astrology 2026. So my 2026 quote unquote prediction video, but it's not about what's going to happen personally. It's about what's going to happen in the world. And this is pretty intense to work on, because I've been looking at the astrology of 2026 like since 2021. I've been looking especially at this Saturn-Neptune conjunction for a long time, and it's insane how like, I don't want to say like all of my predictions came true, because they did not. Lots and lots of things that I said were going to happen have not happened. Or, mostly I don't ever say this is going to happen, but things that I said this could turn out this way or whatever, it didn't. But also like the big stuff, it is turning out like I said that it was going to. Like the shadow of America's history is rising. There is no putting it back under the surface, and the climate crisis is peaking, maybe not peaking, but it is like reaching a massive tipping point where we are having to become more aware of it. And like the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in early Aries, I've been saying since 2021, it's going to be a big wake-up call around the climate crisis. And then, yeah, Uranus and Gemini, all the technology stuff, that stuff I did not predict. The way that it's turning out, I did not look that deeply into the abyss, I guess. But anyway, it's intense to work on this video, because I'll probably still get a lot of things wrong in terms of like specifics, but these energies are coming. These energies are here. Like we are surfing them right now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting that done, spitting it out and sharing it with y'all. And as heavy as it is, I hope, as always, that my takes will be helpful in just starting to like wrap your brain around what we're living through here. All right, so that's coming soon, and I'll be around. Follow me on Instagram if you're not there already, at Collapse Astrology. And thank you, as always, so much for being here. Have a good night, everyone.